Welcome to this edition of Thoughts from the Big Chair. Now, this week we're joined by the CEO of 1105 Media, Rajeev Kapur. How are you doing, Rajeev?
Russell, fantastic. How are you?
Fantastic as well. Now, listen, thanks for joining us. And what we really want to talk about today is how businesses have had to, whether they liked it or not, gone through a digital transformation process. And I know that perhaps if you tell us a bit about your business and put that in context, because you've gone from largely a magazine business to with that now being a small component of your overall revenues, and you've had to shift your business model quite quickly, particularly in context of COVID. So perhaps tell us a bit about your business, the change you have made as a result of COVID, and where you see the challenges and opportunities are going forward.
Yeah, no, great. It's a great question. I'm glad to be here. It's an honor, obviously, to spend more time with you. So, yeah, no, look, as you mentioned, we were largely a publisher for a long time, transformed the business to be more events and digital focused. We're on a great trajectory, and then COVID hit. But to give a little bit of context on why we're probably talking today, and the listeners probably why are you talking to Rajeev, is 1105 Media is a B2B media and marketing company. And our job is to connect buyers with sellers. That's essentially what we do, and we do it across the commercial segment, the education segment, the government segment. 99% of our business is here in the U.S. And we focus primarily. Our specialty ends up being in analytics, BI, IT, enterprise, a little bit of infrastructure, kind of in that world. So, with that being said, as we transform the business from a traditional publisher, as you mentioned, we push more and more into events and more to digital. Well, what happened when COVID hit? Events went away. We were no different than being able to go to a soccer match or go to a concert or whatever you want to go to a restaurant. We were no different. So we lost that business. It was roughly 40 to 45% of our business that we literally lost overnight.
Wow.
And that was a huge impact, right? And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow, right? And it was a hard pill for my team to swallow. And I'm not going to lie, there was probably a 24-hour window there where, I'm sitting out there staring out the window going, holy F, what do we do? Right. And so, there's no pity parties here, and you've got to, get up and you got to go figure it out. And we did. And I told the team, you guys can, we can wallow in our grief here about what's happening, or we can go try to make something of it. And so we decided to make something of it. And the old cliche of making lemonade out of lemons is effectively what we did. So we pivoted. We were probably one of the first firms to offer virtual events. We started pushing more and more into virtual summits. So think like 1 or 2 hour long programs where vendors can come in, specifically talk about their product, their offering, their solution. Editorial webcasts where my team a team of editors would go create webcasts and webinars talking about what's happening in the market. So we came out with a whole slew of new and enhanced products all around that webinar, webcast, virtual summit, virtual event model. And that, coupled with the fact that we started to push more and more digital programs just in general of what we had to offer, we saw within about 90 days of doing that, we started to see an amazing transformation in the business. Our gross margins skyrocketed in the business. And Russell, believe it or not, and look, we did what every other company did. We instituted pay cuts and we did some furloughs and some layoffs. And I'm glad to say, by Q4 of last year, we reinstated all the pay cuts. We started bringing some people back off of furlough. We brought more people back off of furlough this year that we laid off, that were on furlough last year. And we ended up actually having one of our best years ever last year, believe it or not. And we actually had a tremendous cash year. We probably had, we almost tripled our cash position from 2019 to 2020, if you can believe it.
Well, probably you're able to switch a lot of your expense, I'd imagine, which is a lot of flying around and hosting events, to an online event. But I guess the question there is, what were you using? Were you using a kind of SaaS-based platform? Did you have your own product development teams working on that? How did you make that technological switch? Because that seems like a remarkable pivot if you can do that so quickly.
Yeah, so we were already working with, when we were in webinars were already part of our business, right? So, you know, what we were able to do is the platform wasn't the issue. It was the product you're offering through the platform that became the bigger challenge. How do you add more value in this? You know, how many times can people sit on a webinar or a Zoom call or a Teams call, right? And for how long can they do that? And so it really became, at the end of the day, the old adage that content is king, right? And I think one of the things you and I talked about in the past is, in my view, I look at this, we all grew up learning about the 4 Ps: product, price, placement, promotion, right, in school. And so, what I tell my team is really about the 4 Cs: content, 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 content. So content is the most important thing you can think about, whether it's Netflix or whether you're 1105 Media. It's all about content. So it's all about content. Content's number one. And if you have great content, that content's going to develop a community around it. And so you have to have great content. And we started seeing our community start to develop and come to these webinars, come to these summits, come to these virtual events. So when you have those eyeballs coming, what can you do? Well, you can sell them something, right? In our case, we sold sponsorship, and we sold those eyeballs and the data. Well, we didn't take any privacy data. We just sold the data of how many people were coming
Mm.
to the different brands, and they loved it because it was a captive audience, and they're advertising like they would on TV. So we become almost like a little bit of a TV advertiser, where you're charging per eyeball and length and all that other fun stuff, and it was great, and the brands loved it because it was more of a rifle approach to pinpointing marketing, as opposed to more of a shotgun blast. And so that was great. And so that commerce then created cash and for us. So it's content breeds community, community breeds commerce, commerce breeds cash. And so that's what we kind of focused on. That's what we pivoted towards. And that's what really helped us be successful last year. And, we're off to a great start this year. I mean, all the businesses at 1105, and there's 5 of them, are all on track right now to hit their numbers for the year, which is exciting, because that's the first time in a long time that's happened. And typically, when you're managing a multi-company type situation, all companies are at a different stage of maturity, at different levels, different customer bases. So there's always some challenge. But right now, knock on wood, all the companies are on track to have a great year.
And you mentioned data, and obviously content and getting the insights as to what's driving eyeballs. How important is data for you, and how do you manage that in terms of just a technology perspective, but also from a hiring perspective?
From a well, it is important for us. I mean, we have our set of KPIs that we look at on a weekly bi-weekly basis. We understand where we are. We know what number of eyeballs that are coming. We understand the benefit to the sponsors and to the customers are. We understand the benefit to the people listening. So we have all that data. We have all that information, right? So that's terrific. I think, from a hiring perspective, we really, it hasn't had much of an impact at all, to be honest with you. But in terms of overall, what's happening more and more so than anything is that we can look at the data to say what type of content do we want to develop, right? So, for us, it's all about making sure the content is relevant. Like, a lot of people criticize and say, oh, you know, millennials, Gen Z, they don't like content. I go, that's not true. These are the same types of people who will binge watch, you know, Loki on Disney Plus, or The Mandalorian, or Game of Thrones, or Stranger Things, or whatever. It's all about how good that content is, right? If you've
Yeah.
got content, people are going to watch it. People are going to listen. Just like your podcast. If your content's great, people are going to listen. If it's not, people are not going to listen, right? But you'll know that, right? If all of a sudden, if you start to see your downloads drop, you're like, well, maybe we got to change it up a little bit. So it starts and stops with your content at the end of the day.
And pulling off the transformation that you did or you had to, what were the key roles in that? I mean, obviously, you need a good CEO, a leader of the gang, but when it comes to other roles in that, uh, CIO, CTO, what's the pivotal roles, would you say, in that transformational process?
Well, I think we're a little bit different because we're a matrix organization, because the way 1105 is set up. So within 1105, there are 5 companies, and all 5 companies have separate P&Ls, and they all roll up to me. And there's different business unit presidents and GMs who run those groups. and they're all doing something a little bit different. Now, one would argue that those presidents and GMs are critical to the operation because they manage the day-to-day of their P&L and their specific vertical business that they focus on. So, so that's important. Now, one of the things I do is we've decentralized decision making as much as possible. We incentivize based on their P&Ls. We focus on creating a culture of innovation. Everybody knows that no one's going to get fired for making a mistake. So it's a great team. It's a great company, and we're doing a lot of good things, and we're providing really good value to our customers.
And one of the things which we're trying to cover on the book that's coming out early next year is trying to look at the challenge from a board perspective and saying, our boards equipped to support the CEO and the executive team to ask the right questions when it comes to massive change like digital transformation, without passing judgment on your own firm. But any general observations from the skill set at a board level?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you know I've got a pretty good board, and for the most part, it's really the type of look. There's you want to make sure you have a diverse board. Number one, right? You want diversity on your board, and you want diversity from experiences as well. And you know, and I remember just I remember having a board where you have a lot of strong financial people, people that have sold companies, people that have bought companies, people that have gone through their own level of transformation as well in their organization. So at least there's something to talk through. The good thing about boards, well, what I find is that most boards, they take a lot of their cue from the CEO, right? And one of the skill sets I think that gets looked down upon or maybe doesn't get enough credit is the ability to manage up. And I manage up a lot, a lot. And I probably talk to a board member, every week or two. We don't wait just for the board meetings themselves. If there's good news, we talk about the good news. If there's bad news, I deliver the bad news a lot faster, right? And so, because you don't want anybody to be surprised. And what I find is that boards, when they get surprised, they don't like surprises. So the more you can be proactive and discuss and talk to them, the better you are. And so, it's been a good experience with me with my with our traditional 1105 board.
Yeah, and I think I suppose one of the challenges that if you look at the age of most board members, one of the challenges you've got is the diversity of skill sets. Bring a lot of experience. The challenge is whether they have a full appreciation of some of the kind of new technologies that even the exec level are grappling with. So that's going to be hard, and there's perhaps a bit of an education process for boards to ensure that they're up to speed on the technologies that the executive team are going to have to deal with over the course of the next couple of months or years ahead, and that's got to be a challenge as you look to the board level. Probably accentuates that challenge is multiplied when you look at companies outside of the tech sector, where they are perhaps less equipped to deal with some of the big changes, notwithstanding the fact that every company, regardless of industry, is going to have to face fairly substantial challenges.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, I mean, it's easy for board members in the tech sector to get board members in the tech sector, right? I mean, I'm a former tech executive. I was an executive at Dell for a long time, and one would argue I'm still a tech executive because at 1105, 80% of what we do focuses on the enterprise tech and big data and analytics. And so, it's getting tech savvy people when you're in the tech sector is not that hard. Yeah, you're right though that when you get out of the tech sector, maybe you're in healthcare, maybe you're in hospitality and all these other places, you want to make sure that you've got that diversity on there that really understands. Look, if social media is a key part of your strategy, well, maybe you should think about getting somebody who's got experience, with social media. Maybe they don't have to be from Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever, but you know, maybe they've got a platform that does well with, maybe that does well and supports social media, whatever the case might be. So you definitely have to be diverse. I think over time boards diversify, uh, uh, boards, the education of the board diversifies, and their experience diversifies just kind of naturally. I think the one area where you've got to be really conscious about is making sure you've got the right, diversity on the board in terms of, you know, uh, of gender, ethnicities, and all those kinds of things, because you want to make sure that you have a board that's diverse and understands what the world looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think from your experience, certainly using those four C's and trying to drive that through the business to make sure that everybody does understand the kind of rhythm of the business around content and the community and building that community and monetizing it and translating that to cash flow has been a success story for your business. And I hope others can perhaps learn from that 4C model, because I do think those sort of frameworks are really helpful when it comes to trying to navigate some of these challenges thrown up by moving into a new paradigm, particularly accelerated by COVID. So I very much want to thank you, Rajeev, for sharing that and sharing your success story as you've kind of moved the business through the choppy waters of COVID into what is still murky waters, but hopefully calmer going ahead. And that's obviously been a big success at 1105 Media. So congrats on that front. And look forward to keeping in touch and hearing more about how the organization is progressing and what challenges lie ahead. And on that note, I was just going to ask you, if you sit here at the moment and say, actually, whilst we don't have a crystal ball from a digital transformation, what do you think the next couple of challenges are moving forward?
Yeah, no, first of all, I appreciate that. For me, it's been a pretty amazing journey to see how we've been able to really come through this pandemic. And all the credit, as I mentioned earlier, goes to my team. And kind of I took the time to not only do what I can to support them, but also to figure out how to take care of myself in this process. And so, but in terms of answering the question of where I see the challenges in the future, look, I think with the Delta variant right now, I think the jury's out a little bit on what happens with face-to-face events still. I think the sporting things and perhaps maybe even movie theaters and maybe some dining will probably return a lot sooner. But in terms of B2B events, uh, events that where you have to pay good money to attend, the more expensive events are the ones that are probably going to be the last to come back. So I think that's going to be a challenge. I think figuring out how the change in technology over the next 3 to 5 years is going to be a major challenge with the implementation of AI and IoT and those kinds of solutions out there. What is that going to mean to people? I think the others, but the flip side of this though is that I absolutely firmly believe that we're on a somewhat of a hybrid new age of enlightenment / industrial revolution as well, and that in the next 5 years, we're going to see massive, I think, societal changes overall, and people have to be ready for that.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned it briefly, but what was your resilience points that I mean, as a leader of a gang, how do you kind of make sure that you're equipped with some of the changes ahead?
Well, unfortunately, there was no playbook here, right, on dealing with COVID. And so we kind of had to create it ourselves, and we did. And I think the first point of this whole thing is, you know, you wake up in the morning thinking to yourself, are you a little bit of an imposter, right? We've talked about imposter syndrome a little bit. And, like, gee, am I really the right person to do this? And you kind of have those thoughts in the back of your head for a few minutes, and then the resilient people kick those thoughts out and say, "Yeah, I am," and they go figure it out. And then that's what I did. And so we did. We figured it out, and we've been successful. Knock on wood, and we continue to be successful. And I'm really excited about what the future holds. But when you get on an airplane and the flight attendant says, when they're giving their safety briefing, and they said, in case of a air pressure drop, make sure you put on your mask first before you put on someone else's mask, right?
Yeah.
I had to put on my own mask first. And so that's what I did. So I had to make sure I was in the right place to do this, and I was, and we did. But more importantly, I had to figure out other ways for me to also then diversify myself. Because if I was just 24/7 in the business, I would have burnt out and wouldn't have done anybody any good, and wouldn't have done the business good, and wouldn't have done my family good, friends, anybody. So I made a conscious effort to see how I can not just transform the business, but how can I transform myself. So I'm excited about your book. And as you know, I've also written a book. It's going to come out. It's going to probably go for pre-order here in the middle of August. It's all about the future of leadership, and so that's exciting. And so I'm going to give it a plug. It's called Chase Greatness, and so that's coming out, pre-orders in middle of August. I've also dabbled with in developing a movie script, which was kind of cool. It's been a lot of fun. That's been a great and fun process. I've been exploring different. I've been really enamored with longevity and superfoods, and that's become a little bit more of a hobby in terms of figuring that out and how that works, and just focusing on my health, and done that. So it's really been quite an amazing journey. And so it's been a lot of it's been fun, and it's been challenging.
Yeah.
And so it's been great. But I'm blessed to be around. I've got a lot of gratitude, and for an amazing team, and an amazing support structure, and that's really, and that gratitude has really enabled the resilience, and so that one should have. So
Yeah, I think getting equipped personally, mentally, and physically for the battles that lie ahead is all good. I think we can all learn something from that. So yeah, really, thanks again, Rajiv, for taking the time, sharing your business insights, the business story that you've taken the business on during COVID, and some personal reflections as well. So once again, thanks for your time. Thanks for being on the show, and look forward to catching up again soon.